guest speaker tonight has been on the road speaking since Thursday, and so she's going to come at the appointed time and be strong. She's not going to keep you long, but you better get your questions together. So I'm letting you know now. She spoke on Thursday, gave a sermon on Friday night at an awards dinner that we were at, and then had another program today. So we are delighted to have her here. Jordan Thomas will give the introduction when we're ready for it. But delighted to see you back on campus. To those in the community, great to see you as well. So without any further ado, what I would like to do is ask the 17th president of Wabash College, Dr. Scott Feller, to come to the podium, and he will introduce our speaker, give the welcome for tonight.
Thank you, everyone. I've done enough of these to know Stephen runs a tight ship, but I'm going to go off script just a bit because I would like us to put our hands together to thank Stephen, the staff of the Malcolm X Institute of Black Studies, and all of the students for their work in organizing this fantastic It is indeed my great honor to welcome all of you here this evening as we honor the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was an advocate for peace at a time of sweeping change and disruption. He was an advocate for the poor, the less educated, and the underserved. He led an international conversation on the fight for human dignity for all people. He was a passionate and inspiring leader and one of the great orators of our time. He was just 39 years old when he was assassinated in Memphis. Yesterday would have been his 94th birthday. So it's important that we take this day to remember Dr. King and his unceasing efforts to embrace all of humanity and create a society where all are created equally and with dignity. It's also important to reflect on some of Dr. King's thoughts at this moment in time, when our nation is angry, disillusioned, and uncertain, which in 1961 Dr. King called the cancerous disease of disunity. Our world longs for his strong ethical leadership, and while we don't have him here with us today, we have his words, his thoughts, and his legacy that we can build as we all work to build a better world. Dr. King once said, people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they've not communicated with each other. My hope for us at Wabash is that we'll strive to be a place where difference is not only accepted, but it's honored. We'll strive to cultivate integrity and courage in each and every young man, and to be a place where every student feels a strong sense of belonging. Because Wabash can and must be a place where we communicate with each other, understand each other, and get along with each other. So I'd like to close with another quote from Dr. King. As my sufferings mounted, I soon realized there were two ways in which I could respond to my situation. Either to react with bitterness or seek to transform the suffering into a creative force. I decided to follow the latter course. Tonight, as we remember the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it's right that we challenge ourselves to be that creative force that helps bend the arc of history towards justice and equity for all. To conclude, thank you one and all for being with us tonight, especially our keynote speaker, Karrah. And at this time, it's my honor to welcome Jordan Thomas, who will introduce our speaker.
So I'm Jordan Thomas. I am from Brownsburg, Indiana. I'm a Wabash I'm a junior here at Wabash. I'm majoring in philosophy, double minoring in Black Studies and business. I'm also a consultant for the CIBE program here at Wabash. I'm also a co-lead of the membership committee for the Malcolm X Institute. And I'm a student coach on the track team as well. But enough of me. I come up here to talk about me. What's most important is our keynote speaker. Karrah is an alumna of the South Bend Community School Corporation and a native of South Bend, Indiana. Karrah earned both her law degree from Valparaiso University and her bachelor's in communications and public relations from Purdue University. The selection of Karrah to his cabinet as Indiana's first ever Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Opportunity Officer was announced by Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb on November 19, 2020. Karrah has spent almost 10 years working for the University of Notre Dame, where she was mostly held the position of Director of Public Affairs in the Office of the Public Affairs and Communication before joining Governor Holcomb's staff. She worked as Director of the Office of Institutional Equity and University, Title IX Coordinator for the Office of Human Resources at the University of Notre Dame prior to her position with the Public Affairs. She strives to improve state processes as well as remove barriers from the workplace and from the services the state offers in this capacity. Karrah serves on numerous committees and boards, most recently being appointed to the Commission on Equity and Access of the Indiana Supreme Court, where she serves as the chair of a subcommittee tasked with developing programs that will diversify Indiana's bench and bar. Moreover, she helps her brother, who serves as a senior pastor, and their parents at the South Bend, Indiana church, where her family is involved in, called Faith Alive Ministries. Karrah enjoys spending her time with her husband, Ray, and their 3 beautiful children, Bryce, Brianna, and Jamari, while she isn't performing her, of course, busy professional task. So, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to stop speaking and let Karrah finish it off, but please give her a welcoming applause.
Indiana, Montgomery County. I've never been to Montgomery County before. It's my first time. So I'm really excited to be here. I want to give a special thank you to Dean Jones for inviting me, the Malcolm X Institute of Black Studies, and to Dr. Feller. We got to meet each other the other night in Indianapolis, where you all got a Champions of Diversity Award for I preached a little bit. I won't preach today. I am an assistant pastor at my family's church. My parents founded their ministry over 42 years ago, and my brother, Pastor YPJ, is our senior pastor, and so I serve here as his assistant pastor. But what I really love is that I get to serve the state of Indiana every single day. And I will tell you, when I was at the University of Notre Dame working in the Office of Public Affairs and Communications, I thought I was going to be there for a long time, job security. I knew higher education wasn't going anywhere. I'd been there for nearly a decade and was really excited about serving our students, our faculty, and our staff at Notre Dame. But when Governor Holcomb and his team reached out about this opportunity for me to put my name in the hat, to look at statewide equity and access and how Hoosiers were living their quality of life, I said, yeah, I'll think about that. Let me look at it. And I saw the position description, and I called them back, and I said, I'm not a diversity expert. That's not the space I'm in. I'm a lawyer. I do a lot of legal compliance. I actually focus on public affairs and our strategic partnerships in St. Joseph County. But once I had the conversation with Governor Holcomb, and he told me that this position was being positioned in the state to really look at how all Hoosiers are living their best quality of life, I thought, this is just a bigger way for me to serve, and I want to do it. My parents raised us in a home where we were taught that our lives were much bigger than our own selfish wants and desires, but that we were created for the purpose to serve others in everything that we do. And my siblings, all of us are in very different fields. I have a sibling that was nominated for a Grammy some years ago. I have another sibling that just opened up a state-of-the-art fitness center. My sister travels all over the world, literally, in multiple countries performing music. But all of us know that at the heart of everything we do, there's service. And so when Governor Holcomb asked me to come in and begin this role, a lot of folks in state government were nervous. They were thinking, how is this going to look? How is this going to be set up? And I started to contemplate and think about and ruminate on leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King and the way that he operated. And in MLK celebrations across the nation, many people will focus on the quotes of Dr. King. We were at a celebration this morning in South Bend, and someone was kind of going through the different quotes of Dr. King. But I want to take a little bit of a different approach. And I want to shift your focus to the essence of who he was. I think it's important that we think about what he said, because we definitely need to focus on those words and put those words into action. But in a time when I would say some of the folks who are in leadership that are the most vocal in leadership across the country, a time where they're missing some of those true characteristics of a genuine leader filled with integrity, filled with compassion and empathy, I think it's important for us to think about the essence of who he was. Dr. King operated with civility. Civility is so important when you think about moving across lines of difference in order to get to solutions for communities. He absolutely operated with empathy. That's critical in making sure that you can put yourself in the shoes of others to understand how they feel. He was very peaceful and nonviolent. That is critical as well, especially when you're dealing with high-charged situations where you need to maintain a steady and a calm approach for daunting solutions that have to be done. But he was also a radical disruptor. He was someone who wasn't afraid to go against the status quo. And so when I came into state government, and I was thinking about how am I going to set this up? How am I going to make sure that I can work across party lines with Republicans, with Democrats, with those that are independents, with those who just simply identify as a child of Jesus Christ, whoever it is. I wanted to be able to shake their hands, hear their perspectives, and work with them. And so I told Governor Holcomb and his team, I said, listen, to me, the most important approach to this is starting at the basic level of civility. And so they said, well, are you going to do some type of diversity training? I'm like, sure, we're going to do diversity training, but I'm not going to walk into a situation where there's never been a chief diversity officer or chief equity officer and immediately roll in and do anti-racism training and do multicultural competency training and make people feel isolated or ostracized from the conversation. I said, let's start with something I call next level teams. It focuses on 3 areas: civility, constructive disagreement, and compassionate listening. And then using those 3 things to really cultivate a culture of inclusion. Why do I bring that up? Well, that's how Dr. King operated. He was civil in the face of daunting racism and hatred. He was compassionate. He listened to the other side. Well, there were folks that didn't want to see the civil rights movement happen. They didn't want to see more access to voting rights for everyone. But even in that, he took the time to understand why they were thinking the way that they were thinking. He took the time to try to see what words, what methods he could use to bring others along. And so that compassionate listening was critical. Constructive disagreement is so important in today's society. There's so many talking heads on TV yelling at one another, people on this side, folks on that side, but are we actually listening to one another so that we can learn, so that we can have a growth mindset? I believe firmly that we shouldn't try to change people's beliefs. I'm 40 years old. No one is going to change my belief. I was raised in a very conservative Christian household. That is who I am, and that's who I'm going to be until the Lord takes me home. But it doesn't mean that people who are raised differently from me don't have valid points of view, and that there aren't things that I can learn from them. And that's how Dr. King operated, using that constructive disagreement to not try to change people's beliefs, but to really try to change the behaviors that were happening in our country at that time. And so that's the way that we've approached the work in the state of Indiana from our office. And I just want to share a couple of things that we've done since I started almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years ago in a couple of weeks. Rolling out that next level team session has been incredibly successful. And I talk about it because I believe firmly that, yes, I'm an African-American woman in the United States of America. I have absolutely experienced systemic racism. I've absolutely experienced oppression. I've even experienced sexism and ageism. But I'm not a victim of my circumstances. I refuse to allow the circumstances around me to dictate my success and how I operate. And so I use those experiences to really kind of extrapolate on that and expound on that in these sessions, and then learn from others who look very different from me in those sessions, and they talk about their experiences in this country. It doesn't make my experience bad, or make theirs better, or make my experience better. It's just different, and so we learn from one another in those situations. We've trained over 5,000 people on this next level teams training, and 97% of folks that have gone through this session have said, we think everyone in state government should do this session, because it's just basic human dignity to treat one another with respect and empathy and civility. The other thing that I'm really proud of is that we're looking at investments into marginalized communities. A lot of folks, when we came in, thought that we were only going to be working on issues that impact the Black population. Absolutely, we are looking at issues that impact Black Hoosiers. But I'm here to look at quality of life for all Hoosiers. We have a lot of Hoosiers in rural Indiana that are dealing with poverty and lack of access to health care and lack of access to broadband so that they can do their educational needs that they need to get done, lack of access to transportation to get them to jobs, right? And so we're looking at how our rural Hoosiers are experiencing quality of life. We're looking at infant mortality across race and ethnicity, but also across income, right? We're looking at our educational achievement gaps and our literacy rates. The governor recently announced that he's supporting the Dolly Parton Imagination Library to be implemented statewide in Indiana. Absolutely a hand clap for that, because what it does, and it's a program I've been advocating for since I got into the State House, what it does is it provides free books to children, regardless of their family's income or their wealth or their lack thereof, from birth to 5 years old, so that these kids have books at home to read with their families and really help us grow literacy in Indiana. So that's one of the other things that we've done. And finally, I'll share this last one. We just started a new program called Pathways to Purpose. And this is another reason I love Dr. Martin Luther King and his legacy. He was a visionary, but he was also a vision and someone to hold up for other young people and people coming behind him to look to. Pathways to Purpose is a work-based learning internship program that is funded by the Lilly Endowment so that I can bring on rural, suburban, and urban high school and college students to do internships within state government, and they are paid internships to expose them into the work that you can do in state government and how you can serve your community. And so I share all that to say that every day when I walk into that state house, and it's tough sometimes walking into that state house right now, politics is a little wacky, but every day that I walk in there, I know that I am so blessed that I get to live the mission of someone like Dr. Martin Luther King, who believed in working across lines of difference, who believed in civility and constructive disagreement, compassionate listening, but who was also a radical disruptor. And so if I can challenge the students particularly in this room to think about how you can really walk that walk, there's a couple things I want to challenge you with today. And this is for all students. I'm talking to our white students, our Black students, our Hispanic students, students with all different abilities. I want you to understand that we have to be the change that we want to see. And so as you exit, and some of you are just coming into college, as you exit high school and you come into college, I want you to think about the types of conversations you're having in the classroom. The types of discussions, what are you learning from one another? College is a very unique time. You'll never have an experience like this again once you're away from college. You're there to learn as much as you can and be a sponge. Be brave, share your thoughts. Even if your thoughts don't really line up with the status quo, be brave and share who you are. Show up as your authentic self because someone else can learn from you. But all I ask is that we do that with civility and respect so that all voices can be heard. If you're a college student who's on your way out the door into corporate America or into nonprofit space or into politics, we need inclusive leaders. Regardless of what you look like, we need people who will operate the way that Dr. King operated. It becomes exhausting turning on Fox or turning on CNN or turning on MSNBC and seeing how divided our country is right now. We have to get back to a place where the essence of how Dr. King operated is at the forefront of everything that we do. But it's not just for us to say that we feel good in these conversations. We're thinking about legacy and what we're leaving for the generations that are coming behind us. If you would just give me the grace for a moment to speak specifically to my Black brothers and sisters in the room, I really have a challenge for you. The Black community has absolutely suffered challenges in this country. And some of this is because we weren't a part of some of those early conversations as to how the Constitution was going to be set up and how these various financial systems were going to be set up and how different laws were going to be set up. There weren't Black faces around the table with those conversations. And so when someone's not at the table, oftentimes we're not thinking about how that population is going to be impacted. And so we are here. This is where we are in the United States today. But to my young Black brothers and sisters in the room, I want you to think about the experiences that you've had in this country. I want you to think about how you can be a change agent. I want you to decide today that our community, the Black community, will not be defined by rappers and pop stars who exploit the Black experience. Yes, with hypersexual lyrics and misogynistic lyrics and violence, that will not define who we are. I want you all to decide that you will be the ones that will put forth images of Black men and women that are powerful, that are impactful, that are empowering, that show the excellence of who you are. Okay? That's my challenge to you today. To my allies in the room, when we think about infant mortality and how that's impacting poor and Hoosiers of color, poor Hoosiers, I want you to think about what's your role in being an inclusive leader and saying, this is not okay. We have to challenge our politicians. We have to challenge our business leaders and others to do better. Because when all of us have access to opportunity, it makes our state stronger as a whole. And so all of us play a role in this walk of civility, in this walk of inclusive leadership, in this walk of peacefulness. But we also all play a role in this walk of radical disruption. There is a time now, and the urgency is great, for us to stand up and say no more of looking at my fellow neighbors suffer when we know that the resources are there. We know that the talent exists in Indiana. We have a ton of foreign direct investment coming into the state. We have a ton of economic activity happening. Indiana is a great place to be, and I plug that for some of our students that are from all over the place. Consider making this your home. We want you to stay here. We want your talent here. But I'm challenging all of us to step up and say, I might not agree with the person on that side or the person back there, but I certainly can listen to them and learn and have a growth mindset so that our communities, our cities, our state, and our nation can be stronger. One of my favorite passages of scripture in the Bible, and I have many of them because I read my Bible every day, but it's found in Micah, and it just talks about how we can put the interests of others above our own interests. It talks about serving in the same way that Christ Jesus served. And you may or may not be a Christian, you may or may not be affiliated with any type of faith at all. But that message of service to others, the more that we can do that in this current time when there's so much division, I really believe that we will start to shift the very trajectory of how we operate in politics, in business, in education, in our communities. And it will give us an opportunity to make sure that we're listening to one another, that we can get to solutions to enhance the quality of life of all Hoosiers in Indiana, but all people in this country. And so I ask you to think about what I've challenged you to do today and take that with you. It's not that tough. Put a smile on your face, go out there, listen to one another, and really build that climate of inclusion. And I really believe our country and our state will be better for it. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and now I want to do some Q&A. That's the fun part. Thank you.
So Dr. Gill, I'll allow you to introduce yourself and while you're preparing your introduction, allow me to present our guest speaker with the sweatshirt.
Yes. I'm pretty sure that my 17-year-old daughter is going to take this from me. She always takes my sweatshirts, but I'll probably get to wear it at least once on the drive home.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Shamira Gelman. I'm the chair of the political science department. I teach a lot of the American politics courses here. And I do research on the civil rights movement, especially its lobbying activities. It's a real honor to moderate the Q&A tonight. So I guess without further ado, what questions do we have?
Hi, my name is JoJo, and I got a question. In your day-to-day life, know, you're gonna come across some speed bumps. How do you navigate through those speed bumps? And how do you do that in a productive manner?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question. A couple of ways. So I always start my morning, and everyone is different. Some people like to meditate. Some people like to, watch the news. I open my Bible app. I read my scriptures. I pray, even if it's just for a quick moment. But there are times when I walk into, again, I work in politics. I'm not an elected official, so I didn't have to run for office, but I am an appointed official, and I work within the Republican Party. And so there are days when I walk into the State House and someone will say something absolutely preposterous to me. And I have to do, my friends say, you do so good with your news anchor face. You just look so pleasant. But deep down inside, my mind is oscillating between 5 or 6 different things that I want to say, and then I'm trying to filter that through what I'm supposed to say. And sometimes I don't always get it right, but when I have a moment to be able to say, you know what, let me think about that and get back to you, I call my mom, or I call my sister, or I call my husband, and they kind of help me through that. But it has taken a lot of training for me to get there. I will tell you, about 6 years ago in my career, I would not have been ready for this position. Because there are so many meetings that you walk into in politics, or with business leaders, or with community leaders, where you're already the bad guy before you ever even opened your mouth. I wasn't mature enough to handle that 6 years ago. But after going through, I went through a lot of corporate coaching and a lot of prayer, you just really have to take those moments to center yourself before you go into any space so that you're ready. And you learn how to do that over time. It gets better over time. And then you just have to have a good, what I like to call a backstage crew, so that when you're not the center of attention and you're backstage with your people who were not yes people, but will tell you when you're wrong and that you didn't say it right, I have people like that around me that help me. So it's important.
Kenny Coleman, Wabash class of 2022.
The famous Kenny Coleman. You walked in and
I ain't no explanation.
Yes, you are.
So as a former member of the Institute, one thing that they asked us when we became members is, who do we align more with, Malcolm X or MLK? And for the current members today and for the members to come, how would you say, or what advice would you give to kind of align Malcolm's philosophy with the philosophy of Dr. King?
I love this question because my senior year of high school, my senior paper was on a juxtaposition of Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I have studied both of these men since I was like 12. And they're actually much more alike than people realize, right? Their messaging was, the way that they talked about things was a little different. Malcolm X was very big on Black nationalism and making sure that we kept our business in our communities, and that he was not a big fan of integration. He talked about that publicly, and then I think there was a shift, towards the latter end of his life. But really at the core of who both of them were, they were trying to make sure that the Black community, who had suffered so much at that time, I mean, think about, these were just a generation and two removed from slavery and other challenges that they've experienced in this country, At the heart of their messaging, it was really about lifting up the Black community, for the Black community to shift their mindset and see the power and the intelligence, the excellence that was amongst them, and not feeling like they couldn't thrive and be great in this country. Both of them were really focused on that. The messaging was different, the approach was different, but at the end of the day, the essence of what they were trying to say was the same. And I will tell you, I think today, in today's politics, there's a place for both of those approaches, right? I think that there are times when I'm in certain groups with certain audiences that I really do lean into that message that Malcolm X had around Black nationalism, not saying that we're shutting other people out, but making sure that the Black community understands that we can start businesses. We can start businesses in our community. We can buy a property in our community and become homeowners and rent our property out, helping them understand that. But on the same front, Dr. King's message of working across lines of difference with people who don't look like you, because we're not always the ones in power. And so we have to understand how to work with those who don't look like us so that those opportunities for us can grow. There's space for both of those ideologies in today's society, but at the heart of it, it's all about uplifting our community so that we can see the greatness within us, for sure.
Good evening. My name is Idris Redmond, and I'm a junior here at Wabash. One thing you said when you were kind of introducing Dr. King that I took note of was you noted him as a radical disruptor.
Absolutely.
And so I was kind of wondering, what was the importance of using it in that way, and what does that mean and what's important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So in today's society, a lot of folks, when they talk about Dr. King, they talk about the really universally palatable quotes from Dr. King. And they, right, they focus on the things that will make everyone feel good. But if you remember, if you've studied him, he was very outspoken about the geopolitical issues of that time, the war. Not a big fan of that. He was very outspoken about that. He's also the same person that the United States government and politicians demonized when he was alive. So like we celebrate him today and we say, oh my gosh, Dr. King was this visionary leader. But when he was in the moment, he was actually a very radical personality for the government and for politicians of that time. And so it's important to remember that while, you know, if I die and then like in 50 years they talk about this great person was in the State House, the first ever, and she was working on infant mortality and trying to bring more investment into the Black community, that's really not what I face every day. People aren't really saying that this great person's in the State House right now, right? I got some people that are within our own party that are really trying to, they're not excited about this work. And so when we say radical disruptor, it's really someone who went against the grain and against the status quo of that time and made people uncomfortable. But I believe if we're going to grow and really change this nation for the better, we have to have those uncomfortable conversations, and we have to have the people that are brave enough to say, yes, I'm a proud American, but I think America can do better. And that makes people uncomfortable sometimes, and he made a lot of people uncomfortable with the way that he was challenging us, because like we talked about, you know, and when I gave a quote for this, there are still many mountains left to climb, right? We've accomplished so much. The fact that there is this little Black girl from the hood, I grew up in the hood. My parents built a beautiful home when I was in middle school. We moved out to the suburbs, but I grew up on the west side of South Bend. This little girl from South Bend, Indiana, from 1137 Blaine Avenue, is serving on the cabinet of a governor. She has her law degree. She has her undergraduate degree. That means that but there's still so many people who look like me who actually have gotten degrees and other things, and there's some systemic issues that block people from having opportunities. So we have to be radical disruptors to make sure that we're, you know, maybe we're the only one right now, but we shouldn't be the only one forever. We should always be creating a pathway, and that's what he was doing for us. And that wasn't always popular.
Good evening. I'm Alan Johnson Jr., senior here at Valparaiso College. My question to you would be, with your background in higher education, as well as what you do now, what are some tips or advice that you would give to someone who's looking to go into diversity and inclusion, and with the opportunity of that, how will they be able to continue to grow the mission of Dr. King?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Well, first and foremost, now, you know, this work is, the diversity, equity, and inclusion space has grown dramatically over the last 5 years, but specifically since 2020, because we saw the social justice movements happening across the country. So there's a lot of different certifications out there that you can do, but the best way, in my opinion, to really dig into this work is to put yourself in situations where you're surrounded with people who are incredibly different from you, so that you can learn from people who are different from you. I love being at a dinner table with folks that have nothing in common with me, because it allows me to get outside of my own comfort zone and ask questions and grow and learn. I'm very vulnerable about this. I have a very good friend, Eric Love, who's the director of diversity and equity and inclusion at Notre Dame, who has, he's very well versed with LGBTQ plus issues. I'm not so much. And so I've had to ask him, am I saying this right? Is this terminology correct? I don't want to be offensive. And we all have to do better with that. I've talked to white men in leadership who say, you know, I'm so scared I'm going to say the wrong thing, I don't say anything at all. And that is not the way to approach it. We have to have grace with one another. So I say, when you're preparing for diversity, equity, and inclusion, put yourself in those situations so that you can learn. Because we all, even those of us that do this work, don't always get it right. And that's the best way to grow and learn, for sure. And then call me if you're looking for a job. I know a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion positions that people need to fill with great talent like yourself.
My name is Olivia Tsushime, sophomore here. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And I have a question. So, you know, you're a Black woman, practice law, preacher, working for a book, you know, and for the state. You know, that's rare. There's not many in your position, you know, as a Black, powerful woman. And you do put some fear in those that may not appear to you. And so my question is, you know, how do you open doors for, you know, Black women, Black men, you know, just people that, you know, because we still have some mountains to climb, like you
We
said.
do. Yeah.
So how do we open doors so we can have more people like you?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, and thank you for the very complimentary words. First and foremost, those of us who look like us that get in these positions, we can't be gatekeepers, okay? There are some folks that are older Black men and women who get into positions of power, they get success, and they want to be gatekeepers and not let others in. We can't operate that way. I'm a firm believer that I'm always thinking about my succession plan. Who can come and take over for me? Because I'm not threatened by that. I know that I'm going to serve and do what I can do, but I want to always open up opportunities for others. The second thing is, our white brothers and sisters who are in positions of power, I like to say our brothers and sisters on the opposite end of the melanin spectrum. Our brothers and sisters in positions of power and influence really have to operate as inclusive leaders, right? Because let's just be honest, when you think about the percentage of women, people of color that are presidents at colleges and universities, the numbers are low. When you think about the number of Black people or Latino people in C-suite positions or on board of directors, the numbers are low. We're doing much better with women. So those that are there, they have to be inclusive leaders to say, I'm going to mentor, I'm going to sponsor, which is different. So I've had mentors, but sponsorship is different. I'll give you a perfect example of sponsorship. When the governor started talking about this role, there was a white gentleman by the name of Steve, who used to be the fire chief in South Bend, Indiana. That's where I met him. He was serving on the governor's cabinet. I had a meeting with Steve for it might have been like an hour and a half meeting in 2015. Steve remembered me from that meeting. I wasn't in this meeting with the governor and the cabinet, but Steve sponsored me in that meeting because guess what he did? He brought my name up. He said, you know, you're talking about this position. There's this woman I know in South Bend named Karrah Miller, because I wasn't married when he had met me. Karrah Miller, you need to talk to her, Governor. You guys, that's true sponsorship when our white brothers and sisters are bringing us up when we're not even in the room to say this opportunity might be good for this young woman or this young man. There's so much power in that. If Steve hadn't mentioned me in that room, I probably wouldn't be in this position today. And so I encourage, like the governor, he's even practiced sponsorship with me, where folks are reaching out to him. He's like, you need to reach out to Karrah Herring. That's the power in having those that don't look like us use their privilege, use their power to open up opportunities for us. That's how we get more diverse people in positions, and that's how we start to create more pathways.
Thank you for that. My name is Jeremiah Clayton. I'm a freshman here at Wabash, and I like going about my day with, you know, always having a smile on my face, because you never know what somebody's going through.
That's right.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, I throw a joke in there. But how important is that attitude aspect? There's a quote that says your attitude determines your altitude. How important is that to, like, I mean, in the position that you are in just in everyday life, how important is that to, you know, to success?
You know, it's critical. I was at a session earlier with my nieces. I have the most talented, beautiful nieces. I should have brought them, they're like 17, 18. I should have brought them here, all these fine young men. I could have introduced them to them, so, my daughter, but they'll come back. For a football game, they'll come back. So they were chatting, and my niece Miracle, she's biracial, she's absolutely the most bubbly person ever, and she just said, you know, sometimes it's tough right now because she's very complimentary. She always says, oh, your hair looks nice. She's always smiling, she's always, you know, making people feel good. But she said in this day and age that a lot of kids think that she wants something from them, or they're like, why are you being so nice? We really have to get back to a place where people are just pleasant with one another, because like you said, you never know what someone's going through, what someone's grappling with that day. And if 2020 taught us nothing else, I mean, we were all in a really tough place. Our students struggling with mental health, we're still seeing the after effects of that because we were all isolated for so long. And we were dealing with a pandemic that we had never dealt with before. We didn't know what was happening. And so smiling at people or just saying thank you or opening a door for someone can really change somebody's day. And you just never know. Our suicide rate for the Black community in Indiana is higher than the national suicide rate for the Black community. And so I encourage our young people to just be kind, because you don't know what someone's dealing with. And even some of the ones that are smiling all the time are dealing with things. And so that's why it's so critical. For me, it's important because there are these stereotypes around things like the angry black woman in the workplace, right, or the aggressive black woman. And so I know that when I'm walking into meetings with legislators, or I'm walking into a meeting with the governor's cabinet, I have to be very mindful of my face. And is it fair that I always have to think about that? Maybe not. But to whom much is given, much is required. And I know that there are those stereotypes out there that I have to combat on a daily basis. And so I try to look pleasant. I don't want to look angry. I don't want to look like people can't approach me, because I know that those things exist. And so having a positive attitude really does determine your altitude in many situations.
Hi, I'm Bill Dahl, class of 75 for Walters University in political science. And welcome. You're quite the wordsmith.
Oh.
And I'm glad I came to listen to you speak tonight. And while listening to you speak, I had to go back in time to, I believe it was for a similar Martin Luther King presentation by an older black gentleman in the 60s. And I always like to take something away from a speaker. And he said, was asked in Q&A, why do you get involved? Why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
And he said, well, if I don't do what I do, then I won't know if I can help at all. And I'd just like to say, if you speak tonight, boy, you're all over the place, and you're doing something very wonderful. So back in that time, things have changed dramatically. And this gentleman said, we're not going to base our future on our rappers, etc. When are we going to have successful black people from both sides, all occupations, successful people of Caucasian, Asian, Mexican at a table? So put them at a table and let's talk about our differences and where our goals and objectives. Because I don't see any of that happening. It just frustrates me. But let's get into the present day. Like, I always wondered about President Kennedy, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther, Dr. King. What would Dr. King think about where we are in our progression for success for humanity? And I'm not into politics, Democrat, Republican. I want to be from the American Party for the American students. I deal with students regularly, and I'm their cheerleader, and you're the cheerleader. So how would you think Martin Luther would think of where we are today?
Yeah.
And where are we going? Are we being successful? And again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I don't want to be as arrogant to think that I would know what his thoughts would be about today, but I can base it on what he said to us, right? He had this dream. He talked about what he saw for the future in this dream, and I think he'd be very happy to see a lot of what we've done to date, but I think he would also challenge us to move beyond just quoting the I Have a Dream speech to actually living it, right? And we're not quite there yet. I think that's what's so important, is that he gave us this foundation of really amazing, powerful words, but we still are climbing these mountains to get to a place where all of us feel like we can show up and be our best selves in this country. I think he would challenge us to do better, because we're not quite there yet. When we have situations where people saw that we had a black president, President Obama, and then comments are, we're in a post-racial America. No, we're not. We're not in a post-racial America. Racism is still very much alive in America. And I know that there are people in certain backgrounds and affiliations in certain states that don't believe diversity, equity, and inclusion work needs to happen. I disagree wholeheartedly. Again, I've experienced much success in this country. I carry a lot of privilege, even as a black woman. But I am not fooled to think just because I've had some level of measure of success that that's the story for all people from marginalized backgrounds. It is not. We still have a lot of work to do. So I really believe that he would challenge us to keep moving in that direction and do what you said, have those conversations with diverse voices to understand where we all are and how we can get to solutions collectively and collaboratively. So thank you for that question. And I will say this, we need our modern day Dr. Kings to step up. We need our modern day Fannie Lou Hamers and our modern day Julian Bonds and Ella Bakers to step up and say, yes, I want to be that voice to help get us up that mountain to the other side. And sometimes we have to just flat out say that we're going to be a radical disruptor, and instead of climbing the mountain, we're just going to have to move it out of the way. Though there are times where we have to have that type of urgency, where we don't have time to climb all these mountains. Sometimes we're going to have to blow it up, get it out of the way, and keep moving forward. And there are ways to do that. So I think that he would just challenge us to keep working on it.
Jack senior here. Thanks for coming out tonight. You mentioned that as a Republican, a lot of people in your party may disagree with the work that you're doing, and so I'm just curious how you push through those friction points, and when people do disagree with your efforts, how you pass that, and then how you move forward with them.
Thank you for that question. You know, one of the first times I had this like in my face experience about people not wanting this work to happen, a legislator last year during session proposed a bill to eliminate my office. And I thought, well, tell us how you really feel, sir. And I asked the governor, I said, this isn't fair. Can I respond? Can I say something? And he said, no, you don't respond. You don't get down in that, in that mess down there. He said, you just focus on the work and let the work speak for itself. And you let the people who are working with the legislators figure that piece out. And I've had to be really, that's hard for me, especially when because I know the work that we're doing is so good and it's helping so many people from so many different backgrounds. And I've had to just really pace myself and be like, it's okay, I'm not gonna win them all, but what I can do is just continue to do the work and let it speak for itself. And then also, I just call my best friends and I'm like, what is going on? Or I'll call my mom and my dad and my brother and I'm like, y'all pray, y'all need to pray right now. I'm about to lose it in this state house, right? Like I have to talk to them and get that out of my system and then walk into the meeting with my pleasant girl face, so I'm not the angry black woman, but just focusing on the work and forging ahead is what I've had to do. And I will tell you, that's hard and I've taken a lot of hits with this work, but I believe that when you are a trailblazer, which is what some have called me because I'm the first one to do this position, you really have to have thick skin because you don't blaze trails without getting a couple burns, and that's okay because you're taking those hits for the people that are coming behind you, and I'm all for it. I'm like, sign me up, it's all good.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is David Curtin. I didn't go to Wabash. I'm an Ivy grad, so don't you guys.
Oh, I forgive you. Oh, I'm a Purdue girl. How dare you?
First of all, I'm really happy to be here.
Nice to
And
meet
you
you.
touched on a couple of things that I wasn't going to say anything. I really just came to meet you and, sit with the president. Stephen and I do one of the things together. But we had a brief conversation at the front of right here. I found it, and I'm in the investment banking business. But one of my not-for-profits that I started is the Indiana Project. And I mentioned to you how it was critically important. I did text the governor about introducing my project to the Department of Workforce Development. I would just want to do one thing. If all the men in this room that are going to be a part of the Indiana Project, just stand. The people that are going to work with me on the Indiana Project. This project is designed because there's only 2% African Americans on Wall Street, 2 out of 100. The project is designed to give them the SIE certificate, which is the precursor to the Series 7, that will allow these guys to work at private equity firms, hedge funds, broker-dealers, and asset management shops. It's critical that our governor, who is an incredible guy, understands that. And we get support. The more people that I can help, it's not just me. The Lord has given me a team of the best and brightest black minds on Wall Street currently that are assisting these guys, not just in Wabash, but we have students from Purdue, IU, and Butler, as well as Wabash. And as you know, as I told you, we'll probably be in the states of Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Louisville, Kentucky. Shit, that's not a state. I'm a little nervous, but the point is, please, I wanted you to see these faces because you can put a face when you speak with Governor Hogan. You can say, these guys stood up at Wabash, and these are some of the guys that David Gerden is assisting with the Indiana Project. So thank you, I love your spirit. My father was a pastor. I don't act like it sometimes. My guys know that. So thank you, I love your spirit. Keep up with the work.
I will absolutely connect you with workforce development. I'm going to connect you with the governor's workforce cabinet, and I will absolutely tell the governor. Although you said you texted him today.
I didn't text you today.
Well,
I texted you a couple months ago.
Well, usually when I text message him, he responds right away. But today when I text message him, I still haven't heard back, so he must be relaxing I will definitely make sure. Thank you.
And then there were two, so we have time for two more questions, and we have them lined up here. So yes, we'll finish with you.
My name is Silvio Radice. I'm a freshman here at Wabash. So obviously one of the things that I think about in terms of politics is the polarization we see between both sides today in the United States. It's one of the biggest prohibitors of change, and it really affects just everyday working people that are trying to make a difference. So what do you think needs to change in politics in order to combat that, just so people can, on both sides, can work together better and influence change?
I think one of the most important things for that is people who maybe have never seen themselves as running for public office should consider it, because the ones who are considering it are probably the ones who shouldn't be considering it. So what I've been telling, especially some of the young men and women that I've been meeting at colleges and universities, and some of the young professionals that I've been meeting that have a heart for service and a heart to see America a strong, thriving economy that can work across lines of difference, I asked them to consider some of the political leadership programs that we have at the state level. I'm speaking to the Indiana Leadership Forum on Friday. It's one of those groups that really prepares potential future legislators and elected and appointed officials. And so I just encourage those of you that have a heart for service to maybe think about it. I've had people ask me, are you going to run for something? And I'm like, I'm gonna run from politics, not run for something. But I wanna be a part of the people that help bring up that next generation, that new wave of politicians who want to serve the people and not serve the interests of just a party. That's important.
All right. Hey, I'm Bradley Harrington. It's nice to meet you. I saw you get an award on Friday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to ask, we've talked about how you overcome all of them, but I want to know what is the biggest obstacle that you have to overcome, if that's any of my business.
No, I would love to share. So I'll tell you the biggest obstacle for me right now, personally. I have a husband and I have 3 children. I have a bonus son who's a freshman at Temple University in Philadelphia. My daughter's a senior in high school, and then we have a 2-year-old, Bryce, who just keeps me on my toes. The biggest obstacle personally right now is I work at the State House. I work in Indianapolis, but I still live in South Bend because my husband, who played football for Notre Dame, works for Notre Dame. He's a major gifts fundraiser, so he still works at Notre Dame. So I'm traveling back and forth. And so the biggest thing for me right now is just really finding that balance to still work out, to make sure that I'm a very traditional wife. I cook, I clean, and so doing that and traveling, and my husband is a little spoiled. So trying to balance all of that has been a real challenge for me. Professionally, the biggest obstacle, the number one obstacle, no matter what I'm doing, is going to always be the fact that when I show up in spaces, sometimes I'm the first or I'm the only. And I have to remember that I want to leave an impression that will create an opportunity for others who look like me to come behind me. I never want to ruin something for the next generation of folks. But professionally, I left a very great position with a great university to come into a space of uncertainty. The governor's term is up in 2025, right? So 2024 is his last school year, 25 the new administration comes in. I don't know what's next. And that can be very uncomfortable. And so operating in a space of trying to be comfortable with uncertainty has been really challenging. And I know that God will guide my steps. I'm a firm believer in Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I know that he's placed me where he's placed me. So it'll work out, but I'm a planner. And so boy, it's hard not to know what to plan for next. So that's probably the other big obstacle. And then just, being a Black woman in America isn't always easy, but we make it work, and we try to make it look good while we make it work.
Stay standing. Our program is just about over. I'm going to ask seniors Reese Thomas and Alan Johnson Jr. to come to the front. They're going to lead us in the singing of We Shall Overcome. Since Brother Harrington eased right into his last question about overcoming. And then after that, I'm going to ask the men of the Malcolm X Institute to come to the stage quickly after the singing of We Shall Overcome. And I'm going to ask Sister Lauren J. to take a group picture with my camera. So I'm sure she can handle that. So if our two seniors will lead us, and then we'll move forward with the balance of the program.
So everybody should have the paper with the lyrics on it. We're going to do our best to try to sing this like a Baptist church, as far as loud as possible, with some type of intonation.
It's not about what your voice sounds like, it's about what you're saying, and the true essence of it. Okay, so please join us.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we are not afraid today. Truth shall make us free. Truth shall make us free. Truth shall make us free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe truth shall make us free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
Give yourselves a hand.